In maths, it is true that if x equals y and y equals z, then z equals x. But if you change the word equals to is like, all sorts of problems emerge. Sure, oranges are like grapefruit and tangerines are like oranges, but no one's out here trying to convince you of the benefits of the tangerine technique. Anime is the same kettle of fish, since the easiest way to recommend a show is by saying, yeah, it's like that other thing you know. And the easiest way to turn people away from a show is by saying, yeah, it's like that other thing you know, but not as good. It's simple and even effective, but it isn't always correct. For example, when I wanted to get a friend of mine to watch Violet Evergarden, I tried doing it by saying, it's like Your Lie in April. It was a valiant attempt, since both Violet Evergarden and Your Lie in April are anime where love and grief are major themes, and watching them causes one to go through more tissues than people with poor impulse control on December 1st. But they're both very different in execution. Your Lie in April is a story characterized by two major deaths. Meanwhile, Violet Evergarden is set in the aftermath of my favorite historical event, not World War I TM, where the number of deaths was much more than 2, including, but not limited to... But comparing Violet Evergarden and Your Lie in April at least makes a tiny bit of sense, which is not something I can say for an article I saw recently that was talking about Taco P's Original Sin. I'm not going to spoil Taco P's Original Sin, but if you haven't seen it, I should warn you it gets disturbingly real at points. It's a guttural watch about children enduring abuse and/or abandonment. However, unlike a lot of shows that try to grapple with these themes, it actually uses it as part of a character arc instead of as a crutch. Yes, there are some pretty big plot holes, but it's still a masterfully done series. This is a fairly common sentiment, as I came across an article shortly after finishing the series. The title of this article is Taco P's Original Sin Could Give Redacted the competition it truly deserves. Now, I want you to guess which anime Taco P is being compared to. Just think about what the show is about, what kind of tone it has, and the answer, well, it's obvious. That's right. Frieren. I should mention that I saw this article only about 3 minutes after finishing the series, and while the ending is a bit of a cop-out, it's still one that makes you think. Much like the rest of the series, it really takes a lot out of you after you watch it, but forget all that because I laughed so hard upon saying this I probably woke up my neighbours. I don't really want to be too harsh to the author of this article, since it posits that due to the amount of hype around shows that are heavier on action instead of character development, like Solo Leveling, people are ignoring shows that are more focused on character dynamics. I understand the sentiment, and both Frieren and Taco P aren't held up by their action sequences, but instead by the characters. But like, Frieren's a fantasy series about adventurers going on quests and using magic. Meanwhile, Sanrio Cthulhu aside, the rest of the characters in Taco P's Original Sin only have one magical ability, and that's trauma. Blunt force or otherwise. The unfortunate thing about comparisons is that they often inadvertently drag down what people are trying to recommend. If I went into either Frieren expecting something like Taco P's Original Sin or vice versa, I would have been disappointed, even though I really shouldn't have been tempering my expectations in that manner. In my opinion, no director suffers more with shallow comparisons than Makoto Shinkai. When Kimi no Na wa became a global smash hit, he was being compared to Hayao Miyazaki by a load of dumbasses who had never seen another non-Ghibli anime film. Dumbasses who had never seen another non-Ghibli anime film, like me. I wrote a comment back then, trying to compare both directors in a video talking about Makoto Shinkai almost a decade ago, and that comment has a number of likes that is going to be larger than this video's view count, which is a shame because it was fucking stupid. The comment says that Makoto Shinkai should never... Sorry, wrong voice. Makoto Shinkai should never be compared to Miyazaki. Miyazaki makes the ethereal every day, whereas Shinkai makes the everyday ethereal. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Let's not compare these two directors. Proceeds to compare the two directors, but the whole thing was a bad idea from the start. The comment makes it sound like Miyazaki's works are entirely fantastical and Shinkai's works are solely about joy over the little things in life, to which, obviously, no and no. A load of people have since replied to the comment saying something to the extent of, what are you even on about? And they're frankly being way too polite. This whole statement is one of the most cringe-inducing things I've ever written, but that's not even the most embarrassing part of it all. The embarrassing part is that this is a comment on a Mother's Basement video. After people stopped claiming that Shinkai is the new Miyazaki, unfortunately the comparisons didn't end. Around that time there was a real groundswell of other seishun anime, including Koe no Katachi. Although Koe no Katachi was a very different film from Kimi no Na wa. While it was a teenage romance film, the themes, tone, setting and direction were very far removed from Your Name. Too bad though, because it was also a non-Ghibli, non-franchise anime movie that was able to get popular overseas, so you know what that means. A load of hacks started comparing it to Your Name. Hacks such as myself 2017 was a busy year for me, I produced a video directly comparing the two. This was only a few months after I'd started YouTube, and it was the longest video I'd made at the time. I was really proud of it. I spent a long time scripting it and editing it, and it was just so ass. Both movies hold a special place in my heart, though Your Name is my favourite movie of all time, so any objective assessment of quality is not going to be found here. This was a few years ago though, and since then Makoto Shinkai has released 2 more films, which then both got compared to Your Name by a load of... Actually, that makes a bit more sense. Makoto Shinkai and Comics Wave Films performed very similar roles in the creation of each of those 3 films, so it makes a bit of sense that a guy produced something that's a bit like the other thing he made. However, it's also important to try and judge each of these films individually, especially since they're all fantastic in their own right. Makoto Shinkai's films are very special to me, which is why, when I couldn't be with my family at Christmas last year, I got them to watch Your Name. I gave them a call after they had watched Your Name, and I asked them what they thought, since they don't really watch any anime. They all seemed to like it, but my father said something that I've been thinking about to this day, because his assessment was that Your Name is like an art house film meets Scooby-Doo. I don't know. He said it, not me. I guess the reason that he said it is because my dad has a very limited cultural frame of reference for this. As mentioned, my family doesn't watch much anime, and my father especially didn't grow up with TV and doesn't really watch that many movies, so wait, no, that still does nothing to explain that. I guess there are some scenes with Mitsuha that are a bit like those moments in Scooby-Doo where Velma loses her glasses, except it's a slightly different kind of pear she's blindly groping around for. Because comparisons are not exclusive to directors, but can also be a blight on whole anime studios. Take Wit Studio, for example. They were always burdened by association with the work that put them on the map. Attack on Titan was huge, so as a result, everyone was always judging their early output because it wasn't Attack on Titan. Wit certainly didn't help themselves when they made Cabernet of the Iron Fortress, which is the dictionary definition of not Attack on Titan. But when the wait between seasons of Attack on Titan got shorter, people were more open to judging Wit's other projects by their own merits, and nowadays there's many Studio Wit anime besides Shingeki that people point to as marks of their quality. Take Osama Ranking, for example. It's that rare kind of series where there is tangible conflict that culminates in battles, yet not a single dislikable character because all of the actions are the results of sympathetic motivations. Osama Ranking is something that has a solid identity of its own, where you can feel a Studio Wit level of quality emanating from it, but that quality is not hindering the show having its own style. It's not something you'd think of if I said Studio Wit to someone only a decade ago. There's nothing here that's even remotely like Attack on Titan. Hold on. I don't like how Boji's looking at that tree stump. I think he knows something. The problem that Wit had trying to escape the legacy of Attack on Titan was almost threefold for Studio Trigger. I'm not going to elaborate on it because I've already made a full video about how it happened and how they overcame it, but I will say that Trigger did bring a lot of the comparisons on themselves when their first big project was Kill la Kill, which was billed as the second time the team behind Gurren Lagann put an original anime together. Kill la Kill is like Gurren Lagann, just stylistically instead of thematically. If you want to compare Gurren Lagann to something, compare it to Evangelion. I've seen a lot of really interesting points about this raised on the video I made about Gurren Lagann before I watched Evangelion, which is that Simone is essentially Shinji if he believed in himself and those around him encouraged him. I think this is a really interesting point if you also factor in that both have people they directly aspire to be, and their lowest points are after that person gets taken away from them. Both are also building off of work done by Gainax on Gunbuster, so there's a lot to chew on with this theory. Simone even has a cameo in Evangelion. Wait, no, that's Seaman. Yet to me, there's an anime that Gurren Lagann reminds me of even more than either Evangelion or Kill la Kill. And it's a weird pick, but it's Your Lie in April. Look, I haven't been to the gym today, so I need to get my stretches in somewhere. At first glance, the two aren't related in the slightest, but this pairing, which I'm nicknaming Drill Music, has a lot more to it under the hood. Structurally, they're both complete stories told within two cores, with the first being about the MC starting in a dark place before finding determination after overcoming the despair they feel over a personal loss, and the latter being about them refusing to let go of that determination despite further setbacks. These setbacks come in the form of losing people close to them, and how their first experience of grief influences how they process that grief the second time. Both leads also become mentors during the second core, and while they are initially unsure of whether they deserve to be looked up to, they throw their all into inspiring their students. It's something I've thought about occasionally, just because I'm surprised by how much these shows I considered some of my favourites have in common, given you'd only really compare them to shows that are in their own genre. And now I have a whole new perspective on recommending anime. So to that friend I mentioned earlier, you should watch Violet Evergarden. It's like Kill la Kill. As shallow as comparisons can be, that's also why they're nothing to worry about. Something that shallow will never become the be-all and end-all when it comes to describing a series. As always, go in without expectations and make a judgment for yourself. Comparisons are also just a fun thought experiment if you're the kind of wanky arsehole who uses the word thought experiment when talking about their Asian cartoons. Even gaming in the Clinton years tier comparisons, like that one between Freeren and Takopi I mentioned earlier, have some kind of merit to them, since they at least get the noggin jogging to try and make you think what prompted such a take, and it also gets me pondering. What if Takopi's original sin was more like Freeren? What would happen if that lonely elementary schooler looked under the pipe to find not an alien, but a 1,000-year-old elven mage? What magical advice could Freeren give Shizuka to help her with her struggles? Some of my edgier viewers might know where I'm going with this one.